Psyker is one of the most hyped classes for Warhammer 40,000 Darktide, finally allowing you to live your fantasies of becoming Emperor Palpatine in a glorious grimdark fashion, or Tom Cruise electrifying Oprah, whichever one fits the bill for you. In this video today, I want to showcase my Dr. Head Popper Psyker build that, unlike most builds, utilizes a rapid-fire lasgun to constantly trigger head bursts and maintain warp charges. This is a very unconventional build, and it's meant to be a bit different. It's worth noting in my game build at the time, I did not have access to a lot of the other fun Psyker weapons teased in the trailer, so those might become far superior to this. If you've not seen my veteran sharpshooter video, the way I'm going to structure this video is by going over the build and the feat selections first. You can find the picture of that build in the description, so you don't even need to finish the video if you don't want to. Then I'll give you a nice leveling build for Psyker, followed by some weapon choices for the endgame build, and I'll conclude the video by giving you my closing thoughts over some gameplay of the build. You can quickly navigate to each subject that interests you the most using the chapters in both the timeline and the description, and if you end up enjoying the video, please don't forget to like, comment, or subscribe. I cannot tell you how much that helps out any content creator you watch, and I will be covering a ton of Darktide content with a lot of build, weapon, and general gameplay guides all coming out in the next week or so. I'll be streaming on Twitch with the same username I have on YouTube. Consequently, I'll also be streaming on YouTube. Find that in the description too. But let's get started here on my Dr. Head Popper build for Warhammer 40k Darktide. Loading into the game, we have the build for our Dr. Head Popper. You can find a picture of this in the description below for your kind of easy reference. And I'm going to unclick all these and we're going to go through some stuff, because the big thing with Psyker is, unlike any class, it truly doesn't feel like it starts to come off the ground until the mid to latter portions, like 20, 25, 30, when you can get a lot of feats that link things together. So I think that Psyker is going to have that big barrier of entry with that in mind. And don't worry, we'll cover all that in our leveling portion. So I'm going to unclick all these if I hopefully remember them. Now, going through this, we have Warp Siphon. Killing an enemy with Brain Burst earns a warp charge. Each charge grants 3% damage. Warp charges are retained for 25 seconds. You can store up to 4. So this gives you a total of 12% damage increase, which is very nice. But we don't necessarily use this for the damage increase. We use them for other abilities, and we'll go over that in a sec. Battle Meditation, 10% chance to quell, 10% peril on kill. This can be good. Well, it is good. It's iconic, so you don't lose it. You have an aura that also increases the damage that you do towards elite enemies. But here's the big guy: Brain Burst. So target an enemy and charge the ability to deal high damage. You deal warp damage. This is considered a warp attack for all intents and purposes when we talk about stuff going into level 5. So warp Absorption is your big thing here. Replenish 25 or 20% toughness when you kill an enemy with a warp attack. Remember, Brain Burst is a warp attack. Using your Force Sword is a warp attack when you charge it up and doing those things. So you have a lot of ways to get those warp attacks and get reliable replenishment of toughness. The other one here replenishes 30% toughness over 5 seconds on gaining a warp charge. So that might not be great, because the times you're gaining warp charges might necessarily not be amazing. And it's over 5 seconds. And in higher difficulties, that gradual toughness replenishment can get just kind of wiped away by another hit. And this other one here, Quietude, is really good for leveling, not so great in the higher levels. But we're kind of going to really hinge on Psykinetic Wrath once we build into the end of this. But this resets your peril level and staggers your enemies in front of you, just to kind of go over that. Our next one here is going to be Rack and Ruin. Killing an elite or specialist with Brain Burst applies 2 stacks of Soul Blaze to all enemies within 3 meters of the target. So basically, you're spreading a bunch of damage over time, 2 stacks of damage over time, to everyone within 3 meters of the target. And more often than not, elites or specialists are within a bunch of enemies, especially if they're charging towards you. They're probably going to be knee deep in enemies, and this gives you the chance to kill them with the Brain Burst, either using your Blitz or via some of the feats we're going to talk about, and getting a lot of Soul Blaze out there and doing a lot of damage. Next up here, we have Cerebral Lacerations. Damaging an enemy with your Brain Burst ability causes them to take 15% damage from all non-warp sources for 5 seconds. Now, the damage you're going to be dealing from a range perspective is non-warp source, and all of your other bros in your squad, unless they are Psykers as well, is non-warp source. So you'll be dealing 15% damage with your ranged weapon. And if you're fighting against a monstrosity or a boss, you're going to be doing more damage here because you probably have brain bursted them. And if you haven't brain bursted them through your blitz, you're going to do it through our level 25 feat. Don't worry about it. And the nice thing too is this stacks with our warp charges that are going to total up to 12% damage if you have them. Moving into our middle one here, we have, no. Yeah. It is kinetic shield. So take between 10 and 33% reduced toughness damage from range attacks based on your current number of warp charges. So getting warp charges is not going to be overly difficult for you. And this mitigates a lot of the damage that you're going to take by reducing the toughness damage. We've talked so many times about how I love toughness damage reductions or replenishing toughness because it is a infinite resource, not a finite resource like health. Another alternative here is mind and motion. Your movement speed is not reduced while quelling peril. Because of this build, I don't find that I build up a ton of peril, so I'm not quelling it as much. Quelling it is holding down R and replenishing and reducing my peril. But if you do kind of do something contrary to this, it's definitely better for leveling, but mind and motion for the intents of this build is not as great. I think everyone's going to choose it by default though outside of that. Your other one here is while below critical peril, blocking an attack increases or causes you to gain peril instead of losing stamina. I'd rather just lose the stamina. I don't want this to put me into critical peril and not allow me to do things. So I'm not really a huge fan of this one. Into our last ability here for 25, we get kinetic flare. This is what makes the popper. All attacks have 10% chance on hit to brain burst the target. This cannot occur while at critical peril and has a cooldown of 15 seconds. Now the 15-second cooldown is a little bit of a speed bump in this build. It does reduce the effectiveness of this build a little bit because if you're using anything other than the ranged weapon I'm going to talk about, you just can't get this thing to trip off as much. With the 15 seconds on it, it just really kind of isn't as awesome. Having 6 warp charges is probably going to be a default for people, or kinetic overload, that while you have max charges, you gain, it applies 4 stacks of soul blaze to a nearby enemy, prioritizing elites. This is really good if you are not going, if you're going full in with your force staff and your force sword. We are not in this build. Our last option here on level 30 is Ascendant Blaze. So Psykenic's Wrath expends all warp charges and applies stacks of Soul Blaze to enemies based on the number of warp charges expended. Enemies killed by your Soul Blaze. Now this is not from the alt. This is any source. That's right there. From any source have a 10% chance to grant you a warp charge. So you'll be getting warp charges like crazy from the Ascendant Blaze or from Soul Blaze going off. If you've got this right here, you're bursting things heads left and right with Rack and Ruin. So if you kill an elite or a specialist with either your Brain Burst here or your Brain Burst here, this is going to apply Soul Blaze. And if it applies Soul Blaze to just a Poxwalker, it's going to kill the Poxwalker, and it's going to then trigger that 10% chance to give you a warp charge. This is all about stacking Soul Blaze and about popping heads left and right. So this is a very fun build. I really, really enjoy it. Let's go into a leveling version of this though. So if I'm leveling up, I'm just starting out. Remember, you don't have a lot of synergy. So you're not building for the long haul. When you're level 30, you can go, okay, I'm going to build around this and then pick the feats that you want. In the beginning, it's really rough. So go with Quietude here because it gives you toughness for each 10% peril quelled. And you're already having 10% chance to quell every time you kill something. So these two kind of work hand in hand with each other and you don't have to kind of fight around things. Then definitely go with 6% peril resistance per warp charge so that you can get used to how peril works and you're brand new to this. You might be kind of getting tripped up a lot right here. Go with that. If you're totally comfortable with how peril works, then go with, which one was it? Yeah. Go here with Rack and Ruin. That one's going to be okay for you, but I would stick with the peril resistance. It's probably a little bit better for you. Into our Cerebral Lacerations again. These other two, whenever you are an ally in Coherency, kill an enemy, you have 4% chance to gain a warp charge. That's nice, but it does require you to really stay within Coherency. And if you're brand new to the game, you probably don't have that muscle memory established just yet, or you just don't have that cohesion with a core group of people yet. So I don't like to rely on Coherency when I'm leveling up. Same thing here. This is, again, requires Coherency, just not as stoked on that. Then I go definitely Mind and Motion because you're new to this. You're probably using a Force Staff and a Force Sword, so go ahead and stick with this action here. It maintains your movement speed, reduced while quelling peril. It's just really nice. And then I also like to go either Kinetic Overload or Warp Battery here to start up 6 warp charges, or just have these warp charges stack a bunch of Soul Blaze. And if I don't have a good level 30 setup to jump into as far as weapons go and everything like that, and I'm still kind of getting used to the class and I like what I'm doing with my force weapons, go with Kinetic Barrage. For 10 seconds after using Psykinetic Wrath, your Brain Burst charges 25% faster and consumes 50% less peril. What makes this better than the other 2 level 30 perks? Look at the first line right here. Psykinetic Wrath expends all warp charges. Psykinetic Wrath expends all warp charges. This does not. So you keep your warp charges, and that means that you keep the warp siphon ability here. So if I were to do level 30 with Kinetic Barrage, I would do this, because then I get 6 warp charges and I'm getting 18% total damage increase. Yep, 3 times. I'm like, what is my math? Yeah, you get 18% damage increase on this. So it's just a nice little ditty right there. And you're not going to expel them by using Kinetic Barrage. So that's how I would use this from a leveling perspective. But now let me show you how some of this stuff works together when we just pop heads left and right. So the big draw of this is, again, we're going to be using this specific lasgun, and I'll go over that in the weapon choice section, the one that the Elysian drop troops use, and it's got a very rapid fire. So I'm just going to kind of pop some heads, and this is on hit. It doesn't need to actually kill them with a headshot. And we're going to keep doing, oh, that's a head burst right there. So as we're dealing with waves of things, remember we can't do this again for 15 seconds. We can just kind of constantly be getting these headshots in. And with a 104 magazine clip, this can go off a lot faster than you think it can. Again, this is, there we go, another head burst that kept that going here. You know what? This guy's over here. I'm going to switch over to that. I'm going to get a quick head burst in. Boom, that did that. Brings me up in peril. We're going to go back to shooting people in the face. I'm at 3 warp charges now. Remember, we can only tap out at 4, and that's okay. And it doesn't need to be a headshot. I'm just kind of... Yep, there's our 4 headshots, or our 4 bursts. Now, I'm going to go ahead and use my ult. And that just puts a ton of damage on top of them too, pushes them all back, and they'll take those Soul Blazes as perpetual damage into their health profile. I love this because I'm oh, that guy did it. A little burst. That was what I wanted to show off. I'm glad it happened. So the Soul Blaze counts as damage, which contributes to the potential of them getting head bursted. So I was lucky in that it worked on a special over here, but you can use this as a way to kind of blanket apply damage, have that potential for that 10% to kick off and do the head burst and grant you a warp charge, which you can see on the lower left. That is what makes the synergy of this so fun. It does rely on having this specific gun, which I think it unlocked around 15 or 20. And I just really enjoy this a little bit more than the Force Staff because I can still kind of be a threat at range. The Force Staff is great. It's amazing, don't get me wrong, and I only have access to 1 Force Staff in this build, but I like the kind of use of this a little bit more than the Force Staff. I wish I had the other ones to see how I really like them, but still, I just love the fact that I'm racking up these head bursts. Even with that 15-second recycle on this, it's still working really well. I'm still building my head bursts on up to the max range, just because, again, this is just simply damage based. It's not... Probably if I actually hit things, it'll work. There we go, there's a head burst. I could be in, it's any damage, not range damage. So I could be with my sword. I could be attacking things with my sword, and it would still work just fine. I want to get to that 4th one to show it again with the Soul Blaze. If I miss, it's probably good for everyone. There we go. So we'll go over here, and I'll do Soul Blaze again. And we might get lucky. Anyone get a head burst in on them? Sometimes it doesn't happen. I think I'm also still on that 15-second recycle. But that Soul Blaze does count towards the damage, and the head burst can occur, and I just absolutely love it. So now that we've gone through showing you how this kind of works together, and again, you're replenishing any kind of toughness because... Replenish 20% toughness when you kill an enemy with a warp attack. Head burst is a warp attack. So if I'm either using the blitz or this trips off, I'm replenishing toughness while this is all going down. So let's now jump into my weapon loadout. And this is a little more cut and dry than every other build we've done so far. This is your loadout. There it is. You can go with a different primary weapon if you want. Again, I only have a Force Sword. I don't know if there are different variations of Force Sword or if there is a Force Axe, but Force Sword is what you want to go with because, of course, the special attack is a warp attack. It is a charged warp attack. So this helps you replenish anything that you need. It helps do whatever you need it to do. And it's also really good. Like, the warp sword is stupid strong. Like, I'm just there we go. We got a head burst on someone just with my warp, or just with the melee weapon. It's got a really strong attack profile. I really love it. And on top of it, charge it up. That guy's dead. Like, it is so good. It is one of my favorite weapons in the game. I don't know if it can one hit. We're gonna find out. It's basically like doing a brain burst to someone. And I just love the profile on it. Its actual attack attributes. For our weapon, we have our range weapon. We have the Recon lasgun. Now there are two different types, at least in my build, of lasguns. See, this is the only staff I have access to, is the trauma staff. I'm sure there's the fire and the lightning staff from the trailer we saw. There is, it's Mach 2, where is it? I know I got one. This lasgun, which
this ammunition will serve nice.
Has a much faster fire rate, which is great. I mean, that faster fire rate, that's that 10% chance it has a much faster rate to go off, but it has a smaller clip. So be aware of that, a 63 round clip. And that can roll differently. Those attributes are pretty randomized. There is one more Recon lasgun, I think. If there are different mocks of different Recon lasguns that you might not get, that you might not get access to based off of your character class. And it's this one. It's got 107 rounds. A little bit slower of a shot speed than the first one. And a lot slower than the last one we just showed. But I kind of like that Mach 2 because it's a nice balance between punching power, ammo capacity, and fire rate. Again, a lot of those things can be randomly rolled here, as you can see from the profile. The ammo here is going to be either higher or lower, just depending on how it rolls for you. So I do really enjoy the Mach 2 Recon lasgun, but any of the Recon lasguns will do. You might not get access to it until level 10 or 15. If you are just starting out, use the Trauma Force staff or any of the Force staves. They're really, really, really fun. But that covers your weapon choices here for the class. So in closing, I think that this is going to be a very different build than a lot of people are going to go with Psyker. And I think it's like, why would you use a lasgun on a Psyker when you can use a Force staff and a Force sword and never have to deal with ammo? It's just a way to really capitalize on the head burst capabilities of the feat. It's a different way to approach the class, and that's exactly the point of this build and the point of the way you should play this game. Do not spend all of your time min-maxing in the beginning, because you're just going to get bogged down. It's going to frustrate you, and you're going to leave the class or the game. Play the game in the way that's going to really help you out, because you paid fucking money for it, so enjoy it to the best of your own ability. The nice thing, though, about this class is that because you have that really nice capability to lay down a nice curtain of fire, get those brain bursts, and then just smash things with Soul Blaze, you'll be very good at wave clear. You're really good still at hunting down elites and specials, which I really like about this, and why I like the Psyker so much is that in the higher difficulties, the Psyker is absolutely crucial to getting any kind of hotshot lasgun, as I call them, hot lasses, out of the way quickly, or heavy stubbers out of the way quickly. If you do not do that, your team gets pinned down in a real bad fashion in difficulties 4 and up. And on top of that, the sheer amount of guardsmen you have to deal with in those difficulties, it's nice to have a lasgun to just basically kind of lay down a curtain of fire, possibly getting headshots, maybe even outright brain bursting them, and possibly then going for your ult and clearing out a ton with some Soul Blaze. It really helps your team out because you can just really keep things pinned. The trauma staff is great for killing poxwalkers in droves, but I found that I was really suffering at any kind of true ranged engagement because maybe my team had a preacher and an ogre on them, and so if I wasn't brain bursting single targets, I couldn't really use the trauma staff reliably at a mid to long range to kill things. This gives you mid to long, even short range viability with that lasgun, while also retaining your short range chaotic capabilities in your Force Swords capabilities to push, and your ult capability to launch things back and apply Soul Blaze. So Hopefully you enjoy this build. Is, like I said, way different in the way that most people will approach Psyker, but I hope it kind of meshes with a fun, like, sharpshooter Psyker hybrid for you, where you do get to pull from the best of both worlds or whatever it is. If you're having any problems with any of your builds in the game, just go ahead and let me know in the comment section below. This is, of course, a boosted account from Fat Shark, and I no longer have access to really cool characters, so I'll do my best to answer your questions to the best of my ability. But if there's anything you're struggling with, go ahead and let me know. It's totally normal to struggle through levels 5, 10, and 15 up to that point, because especially for the Psyker, it takes a long time for the class to really unlock. You're going to read things like Soul Blaze and go, what the fuck, where does that come in? Don't worry about it. It unlocks more towards the end of the feat tree, so it's a little bit of a kind of lackluster beginning for the class. But once you hit that mid to late game kind of ramp in the feats in your leveling progression, you'll find that this is one of the most fun classes in the game. I did not think most fun or the funnest. It's the funnest class in the game. Or one of the funnest. I didn't like it to begin with. I thought it was really rubbish, but they've really changed things since the closed beta. Your peril drains at a increasing rate. It doesn't just drain at a static rate, and your brain burst charges a little bit faster, maybe 10 or 15% faster, so it feels a lot more fluid, a lot more helpful, and a lot more reliable. So as always, guys, thank you so much for watching here today. Have a good one, and take care.